Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Card Talk, a podcast where we spend a little bit of time talking about cards from Lord of the Rings card game. I'm your host, Dave Walsh.
And I'm Ted Bannock, and I love talking about cards.
Grant can't be here tonight, but Ted in his stead makes me laugh every time.
Yeah, usually Grant's here. He's along for the ride, but he missed the boat, I guess. We'll say. I don't know how to...
Today, Ted, this is going to be a great day. So I have been chasing down this guy from the community that has been an amazing advocate for Lore Faramir, especially. And so,
best card game, right?
Yeah, I'm ruining that surprise. But the best surprise is that the guy that's joining us has been one of the guys that I have always respected their opinions on the forums and in the Facebook group, and he's just super thoughtful about everything that happens in the game. Matt Duckworth, thank you for joining us on the show. How are you today?
Thank you, sir. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm amazing. So,
awesome.
Matt, let's talk a little bit about you and who you are.
Good topic.
Yeah, right. Well, it's a good. There's a lot to talk about there, I guess.
Sure.
But what's your involvement in the game? When did you get started? How long have you been playing? Like, what's your scoop with the game?
Well, for me, I think it started actually about third or fourth grade when a teacher assigned me to read The Hobbit, and I think you guys know the story from there, right? But,
I mean, that's everybody's story, right?
Yeah, you began a long journey,
a long and deep and thorough journey. One that's read the Silmarillion 4 times, so just to give
in
you
a row.
Well, not in a row. No, but I've definitely come back to the few.
I would have been really impressed then.
Like in a row, if you mean by this lifetime.
Yeah, I'd be on the Tolkien professor if I'd done that, I think.
Right.
But no, anyway, I got into the game about the time I think Journey for Rosgobel was coming out. So that would be about
that's pretty early.
Yeah. Third pack, the Mirkwood cycle.
Third AP, yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't there when the core dropped. I remember seeing it drop and thinking, why don't I have this game already? And I just kind of paused on it for a while, but then jumped in and Rosgobel and never went back. So,
oh, right on. Yeah,
Ted, just as go ahead, Ted.
Yeah, most people just have that moment, right, where they crack open the core and it's just, they read through the rules and they see the artwork and the tokens and everything, and it's just like, wow, okay, this is gonna be fun.
Well, what's funny about this game is I've actually quit playing. When Heirs of Numenor came out, I was one of the group that's like, oh man, this isn't fun in solo anymore. I just got trashed by Into
Ithilien, right?
But
this is a 4. This is a 4. How can I get through Into Ithilien?
Yeah, and I think that was in about an 8th month pause where I didn't play the game, and then finally when I finally got back into it, and it's been pretty much straight from there, I'd say. So
that's amazing. So maybe it's worth talking a little bit about this, because I think recently Chad from Cardboard of the Rings kind of said something to you. Yeah, like, wasn't it? I forget what episode. And so this is convenient because Grant's not on the show, but we have Ted, who is on episode 71, and then you were called out. Like, I mean, you've been involved in it. You have not necessarily hosted anything, but you've been a pretty integral part of the community for a while, right?
I mean, at least a loudmouth, if nothing else. So.
Well, Matt, you seem to, you have the stance of where you said you died on the hill defending cards earlier, yep. And I identify with that very much. I tend to take a stance of every card serves some type of purpose. Don't ever pan over a card because, well, the next AP that comes out, that quest that is not released yet, some old card is like the silver bullet to that quest. So I like things not to be dismissed.
Well, that happened to be the day. Matter of fact, I was playing Nightmare Passage through Mirkwood, and that Dunedain guy, I can't even remember his name. He comes out and he cancels the win revealed effect on an enemy.
Dunedain Watcher, you can discard.
The lookout.
Yeah. So I actually decided to put him in. He stopped the Ungoliant spawn instant kill in that quest. So
that's amazing. So Matt, so you've been around for a long time. It seems like in and out at least, by your own description.
Sure.
Um, but I think the community, or at least one guy in the community, really looks to you for specific advice, at least about one particular hero, right? Like, I mean, I think that you in Lore Faramir, when the community struggles to use Lore Faramir, like you're the first to chime in and say, this guy's the shining star in my deck. I may be overstating things, but what's the deal here? What, like, is Lore Faramir the card that he's all, is he all that? Let me say that.
I mean, he's obviously the best hero, right? I'm just kidding. I'm not even going to make that claim here.
Clearly.
But, so I guess just kind of touching on what Ted said just a minute ago, I think I got to lay some groundwork here on how I evaluate cards.
Okay.
So a lot of times I see
this is a podcast. You don't have to do that. You just say something and everybody takes
blurt it out, right?
Yeah, right.
But
Trust me, I know. I've been doing it for a while.
Yeah, I guess I'm not writing my thesis here, am I?
Yeah,
but I kind of
right.
am. We're talking about Lore Faramir.
This is the Lore Faramir thesis.
The Lore Faramir. Yeah. So
totally.
So yeah, well, in a deck building card game, when I look at a new card, when I see a card that's powerful in a new deck, I kind of yawn because I'm like, okay, anybody can play this. You can slot him into any Hobbit deck and he's good. I mean, Ally Treebeard, right? I mean, it'd be a bigger challenge to find a deck that Ally Treebeard doesn't fit in. Right. But since it's a deck building
Court game, Gandalf sort of thing. Right?
Oh yeah. And I'm guilty of using Court Gandalf for everything. But
right.
in a deck building card game, when I see a card, I'm not looking for how generally powerful it is. I get excited when I see a card that's got potential. But to unlock that potential, I have to deck build. And Faramir is a character I really identified with in the books. He's first of all, he's a ranger. If we all had to choose our own D&D class we identified with, here's my nerd coming out. I've always liked rangers. I've liked being in the outdoors. I'm a hunter. My master's degree is in animal science, and I'm also into traditional archery. And sometimes I put all three of those together. So
wow. I would not want to be a deer around where you live.
Well, fortunately, the traditional archer part means as long as you stay outside of 10 yards from me, I'm probably going to miss. So, anyway, so yeah, I've always liked rangers, so I kind of gravitate towards Faramir and Aragorn. So when this pack releases, I see this card that's one of my favorite heroes in the book. Not the movies. We won't talk about those for Faramir. but he's a great character from the book. Just an outstanding piece of Magli art. And the first thing I notice about his ability is this thing's unlimited. There is no ceiling to how high you can get his combat. Now, when I first started deck building around him, I kind of realized, okay, there's some things that bring me back down to reality. There's some work that needs to be done. But I think he's got a lot of potential to unlock, and mostly in multiplayer. But I think he can be very good in solo too. And
let's take a moment because we kind of have a non-traditional entry into the card here. Let's just for the audience go down through and introduce the card. And so, Matt, do you have Hall of Bjorn up, or do you have the card in front of you so you can tell us what the card is? Or
I don't, but I can probably shoot it out through memory.
Okay.
Yep, there you go. Challenged.
1, 2, 3, go.
Yep. So, Lore Faramir.
I'm looking at Hall of Bjorn. I have a second monitor.
Okay, so you're ready to call me out when
I'm ready. I'm ready.
Your podcast. So.
Yeah.
So I know he's 2/2/2. 2 attack, 2 willpower, 2 defense, and he's got 5 hit points.
What's his threat cost?
That'd be 11, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I won't tell you. I had to do that math in my head real quick because I didn't have it in memory. But but yeah, so that's kind of like the traditional Ranger stat line, right? The whole 2/2/2 that people kind of some people wail in agony about it, and other people really love it. And it kind of depends on how you play those Rangers. But so yeah, that's Lore Faramir, and his printed ability is see if how close I can get this to.
Yeah, go ahead. I have it word for word right here. If you're wrong, I'm cutting off the episode right now. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm cooked, huh?
Yeah,
I know it's Lore Faramir gets +1 attack for every enemy in the staging area. Something around those lines.
It's
right?
not every, it's each.
Each enemy.
I'm done. We're done. We're done.
Well, I'm
and he's
no
also
longer
got
the
another.
expert. I was faking it all this time, and now I've been revealed. So
He's actually got another ability that is interesting. In all seriousness, he's got the ranged ability, which
yes,
is
right. I always forget that.
pretty nice.
Solo.
And, and his three traits are Gondor, Ranger, and Noble. And that Noble trait can come in. We'll probably talk a little bit about that.
We'll touch on each one. Each one certainly has its own value. But it's a quick rundown of lore hero Faramir.
Yeah, I think from memory, I think you did pretty good. So Matt is the guy who's going to die on a hill for Lore Faramir when a lot of the community can't use him. How are we using him here then?
Well, I'm sorry, Ted. Go ahead.
Just before you start, Matt. So we also know, what is your primary mode of play? Do you usually play solo, 2-player, or multiplayer? What's your most common? Just so we have some context of how you evaluate when you play.
So I've been playing the game for 7 years now. I mean, almost since it came out, and I can probably count my multiplayer games on my fingers. So that shows you just how incessantly solo I've been. And actually, recently, it's a guy in the community named Christian Bonnet. There, you got his shout out now for the podcast. But he's here in the Atlanta area, and we meet up about once, I'd say about once a month, and play. And it's almost been like discovering a new game, honestly.
But yeah, let's take a rundown into Lore Faramir then, and how.
Did I answer your question, Dave?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ted. I didn't. I got kind of lost in the question.
Oh no.
we're not formal here. We'll just keep talking and we'll be fine.
Yeah. But yeah, I just wanted some context to know, because as we just mentioned, where you use a card can certainly change its value as well.
Oh, absolutely.
So I kind of wanted to know where you were speaking from primarily. So it sounds like mostly from a solo perspective, with sprinkled in multiplayer.
Which is kind of ironic, because I would actually say with a coordinated builds, Faramir's potential is greater in multiplayer. And yet I play him in solo. So
is that because of the ranged ability, or is that?
Well, because his ability scales with enemies and staging, you're just going to see more enemies. And first of all, you're going to see them faster, and you're going to see more of them when you got more players drawing more encounter cards. So it's one of those abilities that scales with the number of counter cards that hit the table. So
okay, so I guess we're in this deep now, Ted. So let's go down the rabbit hole. Okay, so Matt, I'm going to challenge you on the first thing that and you pointed it out when you talked about Lore Faramir in his stat line. So 2-2-2, right? Like people hate that, and I get it, because it seems like if you're going to use not just Lore Faramir but any hero to quest. You don't need 2 attack, and you don't need 2 defense. You're going to use, that 2 willpower, and then the other 4 stats are wasted. So what's the, how are we using Faramir to his greatest ability here? Like, what are you doing that's different than everybody else?
Well, I guess the first thing I'm doing is early in the game, I'm kind of saving Faramir for combat if I can help it. I know those early rounds, you need everybody to quest just to get pushed through. But I'm kind of holding him back, because if he quests and doesn't ready, he's kind of missing out on an opportunity to actually use his ability, which is in the attack phase. But the one thing I do want to say is this is kind of a common problem with Rangers, because we see that with Barivore. We see it. I mean, there's a ton of them. And the thing is the game does actually give us a lot of options to ready Rangers. We've got Wingfoot, which is one cost. We've got those boots now. I actually
leather
got a
boots, right?
argument with C-Stan over that on Facebook. But I'm sure he's right. I'm sure.
It's actually really funny. I played a game with him not too long ago, and I was like, he handed me a deck that he made, and I'm like, what would go great in this deck? Leather boots.
And he probably wanted to punch you through the computer screen, right?
No, it was funny, because it was Lore Faramir, and it was a multiplayer game. Lore Faramir, and I'm like, this would make complete sense here, because it'll probably trigger. But anyway, so leather boots.
Well, and there's kind of a complex line of thought here, because I was actually going to talk about, like, one of the downsides of Faramir, and this is where the multiple stats really come into play, is he's a little bit high threat, and a little bit, and I think his primary challenge has always been, you want to keep enemies in staging, right? But if you're high threat, how do you keep them in staging? And thankfully, there's lots of traps and lots of low threat lore heroes to help. I used to use Merloned a lot. Now, of course, I use probably. I think I typically use Lore Pippin or. Well, actually, my latest build, I bring in Tactics with Tactics Aowen, but so
that Tactics Aowen card is
I
sweet,
know.
you
I feel
know.
terrible every time I put her in a deck, but when you're playing solo, you just need that. You need that early punch of willpower, and you need that low threat, to control staging, especially with a Faramir type deck.
Right.
But the biggest competitor to Lore Faramir is probably actually not so much his ally, because the other two versions are in leadership. The bigger competitor is actually Haldir, I think.
Right. I'm
probably jumping way ahead here.
No. I mean, but that's really what I was going to go. Like, if you need a 2/2/2 ranged character, give me.
In fact, he's actually 3. I think Haldir's 3 attack. So.
Yes, he is his base. Yep. Yeah. And he's also got strong.
Oh, you're talking
traits.
about the hero. I'm thinking of the.
Here.
I'm thinking of the.
Of
the
ally.
Yeah. Allies 2/2/2 with.
Because the thing about Hero Haldir is any trap deck with Faramir, you can swap out Haldir. And I actually wrote an article about this in that Visions of the Palantir blog. I wrote up on traps. And one of the things I mentioned is for a new player getting into the game trying trap decks for the first time, I actually recommend going with Haldir because he's a little more user-friendly and a little easier to slot into a deck and control that staging threat. But my argument for Faramir was that Faramir has a couple advantages that Haldir does not. And the number one advantage is Faramir's attack boost is unlimited. So you get, let's say you've got two enemies ranger spiked in the staging area. Well, now Faramir's 4+4 for the rest of the game. You didn't even have to play attachment on him. I mean, I've gotten in solo play, I've gotten Faramir. When you take enemies in staging and you take Hands Upon the Bow, the tactics event, and you take things like the Ranger Spear that does extra damage to things in traps that I've already got trapped. I've gotten Faramir swinging for 11 or 12 against things in the staging area before. Kind of hard to do that with Haldir.
That is quite high. Yeah. I want to say he's also eligible. He might not have the resources for it, but he's eligible for a lot of other cards that boost his attack. What's that zero cost tactics one that you can play on Gondor? Gondorian Fire, he's eligible for that as well. It requires resources.
I've never used it on him.
Yeah. Requires resources, but if you have it, you could boost his attack even further because of his traits.
Well, and there's another, speaking of Gondor, by the way, there's another advantage that Faramir has over Haldir is one thing about these type of trap decks is because you got low staging, or you're trying to get the starting threat as low as possible to keep enemies in staging, you tend to have squishy characters, and Haldir is squishy. And the cool thing about Faramir is he can actually take a punch. And that's where I was kind of getting when Dave first started asking me about the stat spread. That 2 defense with 5 hit points is actually one of my favorite parts about the card, because one of the weaknesses of a trap deck is every now and then you'll get that enemy that comes through.
What happens when they don't fall in the trap?
What happens when they don't fall in the trap? What happens when their engaging cost is low? And because trap decks usually aren't very heavy on hard stats on your end of the table. So when those enemies come down, sometimes it's hard to deal with them. So if you've got Faramir with Wingfoot, say, or maybe you don't need to quest with him and you have him ready for combat, he can take a punch from most enemies and then at least keep you going for a round till you figure out what to do with that enemy. Does that kind of make sense? To either throw a snare on him, or
I was going to say, to put this into perspective in terms of taking a punch, he's one of the few heroes that can take a punch from the hill troll without dying.
Yeah, yep.
Unbuffed
lots of
hill
things.
Troll.
Yeah.
And so that's 6. That's
and Haldir can't do that. So
right. Haldir definitely can't do that.
No.
Certainly a good point, Matt. I've been in the same situation with Tactics Aragorn, whose primary function is to attack.
Pulling enemies in,
But I've been in situations where I'm like, okay, I need to defend this, and his 2 defense and 5 hit points will be just fine. Or even Faramir has that big hit point pool, so taking an undefended attack of 3 or quite possibly 4, if you want to play it real close to the chest, you could do and come out okay.
Yeah, and that's something that I noticed with a lot of new players when they're building decks. Is there's 2 giant mistakes I see. with deck building in this game. The first one, of course, is just not having an engine, not having a
And
way
the
to
second one is
accelerate
not
resource
using
growth.
Lore Faramir.
The second one is not using Lore Faramir, best hero in the game. But something that's overlooked almost all the time is defense. People have a plan for willpower. They have some kind of gimmick they want to do with their deck. They usually have ways to kill enemies, but people don't put a lot of. And that is last cycle really makes you think about defense hardcore. But defending multiple dragon attacks and stuff. But yeah, the defense is overlooked. And when you got a hero lineup, if you're attacking a staging area, you got Haldir, Lore Pippin, and somebody else with a low threat to keep enemies in staging, you're looking at a squishy lineup that can't take a lot of archery. And you need a defensive plan. Now maybe you had something to.
Let's talk about that. So you're running Lore Faramir, and you shared with Ted and I that your primary, I guess, trap deck. But so just for the audience, who are you running Faramir with to help him? And I mean, is he the shining star in the deck in terms of heroes, or I think you said you're using Tactics Eowyn, but
yeah,
so
unfortunately, I kind of hate myself for it, but
but you need access to tactics if you're going to use some of those really good tactics traps, right? Like
right.
I mean, it's followed as a really good tactics trap.
Well, not only really good, followed's almost what made the trap deck really turn into a viable build, because now you can actually quest for the trap deck, which is something you struggled mightily with before that card came out.
Right. So what does followed do again? Just real quick.
So off the hip, it basically whatever that enemy's threat that it attaches to, it subtracts that from the staging threat. So it's kind of like negative threat.
Right. Because followed engage is you put into your own play area, right? The tactics.
That's correct. Yes.
Are in your own play area, so it comes out of the staging area, and you subtract the threat. So it's like a double duty.
Yeah.
Like for me, I always think of it as a double duty for that.
Well, and here's the thing with that trap build, you also got a new ranger that came out at the same time. That's the I think it's the Emin Arnin Ranger, I believe his name is, who also takes a trapped enemy's threat and adds it to his willpower. So you take this 3-threat enemy out of staging. Not only did you subtract 3 threat out of staging, if you get a followed on him, that's another -3. And then if you got an Emin Arnin Ranger, that's another 3. So you just turn that into a 9-threat game. And that's how trap decks now make. I took my trap deck through the entire Herodrum cycle. Right. And I would never have been able to do that before without those 2 cards, the Emin Arnin Ranger and followed.
So is when you talk about an engine, is that like the engine, like you're maybe not mulliganing for those cards, but are those the cards that are going to get you up and running immediately, or like is that the engine for your trap deck in order to get Faramir going? Or?
No, not really. I guess the first thing when you want to talk about an engine, the first thing I can mention is Damrod. Damrod is kind of what traps used to be. So attachment heavy decks have a problem, and I recognize this with my Dale deck too. Just recently, is when you have a deck that's very dependent on attachments, you need lots and lots of card draw. You need more card draw than the average deck needs card draw, just because instead of getting a lot of allies, you're getting attachments instead. But you need to get the allies too to play the attachments on.
Right, because typically allies have more stats than attachments do.
Right.
So if you're pulling an attachment out, you're not getting the stats that you would if you're casting it.
Right. So not only were these traps, and I was building trap decks back in the days when trapping was hard, believe me. But, no Damrod, and but yeah, with Damrod in there, he kind of greases the wheel a little bit, because you get to draw a card. Suddenly those, he subtracts 1 from the cost, and it draws a card when an enemy hits a trap. So now even like in Athelian Pit, 0 cost with Damrod, throw it up there, an enemy hits it, boom, draw a card. If nothing else, if you don't attack the staging area with it, if you don't use it with a Ranger Spear or some other combo, you've at least drawn a card from it. So Damrod's kind of the essential engine, but when you ask me what I'm mulliganing for, I'm actually mulliganing for the Master of the Forge. That card there is the one. Key engine card of any attachment-heavy lore-heavy deck. I abuse that guy horribly, basically. I use him all the time.
He works overtime every day.
Every day. And it's kind of funny because, like, I mulligan for him. I want to get him on the table as soon as possible. I use him. Then when I get set up, I'm like, okay, you can go die and chump. So, like, that's my gratitude for him. He gets a chump block a troll or something. So.
Right. Well, and just so the audience knows, the Master of the Forge, which is maybe one of the best cards in the game,
Oh, for sure.
or at least is up there. Like, regardless of the build that you're using, the Master of the Forge is, I think, a 2-cost lore ally that allows you to dig for attachments, right? So you get to go through the top 5 of your deck and then put an attachment into play, or not into play, into your hand.
You do need a critical mass of attachments to make them work, but and a trap deck definitely has that.
Right, you can't just have 3 attachments.
Right, yeah.
And so, I mean, this is getting off tangentially, but the latest AP has Reforged in it.
Yes, so, I haven't even brewed with that yet. So
yeah, I was gonna say, but when you're running Tactics Faramir here, you're running lore tactics.
Typically, yes.
Yeah, so I mean, do you replace? Maybe not. I was gonna say, do you replace Tactics AON with Spirit AON just to get Reforged, but probably not.
I don't know that Reforge is even all that essential for a trap deck.
Because, not for the trap, because you can get the traps back with.
Yeah, I mean, you got trying to think of the guy's name, Anborn, I believe.
Yeah, Anborn is the.
He's a little pricey, but once you get him in, he can just fish him out. But a lot of times, I'll use. Oh, go ahead, Ted.
Go ahead. You might be. I bet you're reading my mind. Is he a dwarf?
Yeah. I was reading my. I was about to say a lot of times, if I'm in a scenario that needs me to move fast, like Harad, I didn't even use Anborn. I used that, and I'm having trouble remembering his name. But the poor man's Anborn. You play him, and he digs out whatever attachment's on top.
Yeah, it's Erebor Hammersmith.
There we go. That's the guy. Yep.
He's always been a fantastic core set card because of he's got a great stat line for his ability, and he's recycled attachments for me in trap decks and Halden decks too. Like those attachments heavy. He's super good. So
because in a trap deck, a lot of times, you're gonna have like something like Ranger Spikes. You probably sometimes you want to kill that enemy that has Ranger Spikes, so you can throw it back on the discard and then shuffle it back into your hand to use it for another enemy. And that's where those cards get pretty essential. Him and Anborn to dig those traps back out of discard. So yeah, with those two in play, I just don't see enough of a need for Reforged that's going to make me go and find a way to get Spirit into my deck.
Maybe I should attack this from a different way. Mm-hmm. Why is it that the community? Why don't they get behind Lore Faramir? I mean, you seem to have worked it out, but
I think it's just because I'd be the very first person to tell like a new player, maybe don't start with trying to figure out how to use Faramir, or if you do want to try that type of trap deck, go ahead and use Haldir at first because he's easier to build around and easier to play. I just, for reasons I mentioned earlier, I don't think he has as high of a ceiling in some ways, but it's I think the biggest thing is you just gotta start. You gotta get that threat as low as possible and keep it low. And we have a lot more tools to do that now in lore. I mean that location, that zero cost,
Woodman's
Clearing. Yeah,
when that thing
been
came
a fantastic
out, I was like
card
the angel
for
singing.
many decks.
So, I've been playing mono lore for years, looking for ways to reduce threat. And like I said, when that came out, that was my hallelujah moment in Lord of the Rings, seeing that card show up. So yeah, the community doesn't like him, I think, because he's just not that easy to build around. There's kind of one deck he works with, and I've actually got another one I'm working on right now to see if I can get him to work with, so I can say he's more than just a one-trick pony. But
well, that's really what I was going to get at. Like, is he a one-trick pony, or is he like the 2/2/2 thing? To me, is not necessarily a turnoff, but it can be. Like, it's really the threat cost being up at 11.
Absolutely,
that's probably the so is really the one trick pony to put him in a trap deck with Gamrod or
Ranger Spikes,
with Gamrod and Ranger Spikes, but or does he fit in, like, where else does he go?
Yeah, well, I mean, you can narrow it down pretty quickly because anything high threat's pretty well out. So that draws me in two directions. That, of course, now it's funny because my entire time Lord of the Rings, I've always loved secrecy decks. I've been okay with Hobbit decks. I don't know. But secrecy is great. I was playing secrecy back when secrecy was hard, just like when trapping was hard. But Yeah, the idea I kind of had with him is I'm trying to think of that Rohan guy right now that actually punches guys back into staging and then lowers.
Fastred?
Yeah,
Bastard, yeah.
I'm kind of wondering if there's something between Faramir and him, and then that's something I actually need to do some work and explore. But
See, and then you have Reforged right there.
and there you do have Reforged, and we're probably not talking about a traditional trap
No,
deck
I
at
know.
that point.
No,
So,
but that's a good
Reforged still
application because you could
So,
actually knock enemies into traps with Fast Dread if something engaged you
yeah,
the turn
and
prior.
reduce the threat, right? Which
Yeah.
is Faramir's #1 problem. So,
Yeah.
so I'm
And
thinking there
then
might be something there with some synergy, but I've got some work to do. And when I'm done,
what's that Corset card? Isn't there a Corset card that pushes enemies back to the staging area? Power in the Earth, not Power
Yeah,
in the Earth.
so
That's
Spirit,
Ted's card.
yeah,
Spirit,
So a light in the dark.
Costed, whatever it
light in
is.
the dark, yeah.
It's the 2-cost light in the dark, right?
Well, we don't even need that now because in lore we have the Guardians of Athelion. You play them and they bounce. Well, they bounce enemies back into staging, and then there's another one. The ally. I think it's ally Emblem, is it?
Ally
Or not Emblem.
Moblung
There we go.
will bounce an enemy that you've engaged back to the staging.
And he's actually fantastic because you can play him, draw an enemy down before the questing phase. You can use him to bounce or draw, and then you can quest without that enemy in staging. So there's multiple applications for him.
Well, that's what I'm going to get at. It's like his ability of getting +1 attack, being unlimited, and also not being like the target of conversation about how broken his unlimited ability is.
Yeah.
Like that's and that's the thing. But there's got to be other ways to use him that's not just in a trap. I feel like the trap deck is effective, but it's also like, here's the easy way. Like, let's make traps, let's trap them in the staging area. Force snare. Well, force snares doesn't trap.
It'd be hard to make a Faramir deck without forest snare, even if it wasn't a trap deck traditionally.
Sure, but there's got to be other ways to use him, right? That's what we're doing, right? Do we challenge the audience here at this point to try to figure out, like?
Well, I think when he initially came out, I remember my first impression of Lore Faramir. I remember seeing the core, the ally version of the core set, seeing like, oh wow, Faramir is a unique ally, and I remember thinking, I can't wait till he becomes a hero, and then his hero version comes out, and I'm kind of like, and
a lot of people were, yeah. Oh, I remember well.
When he at least initially launched. But in the cycle that he came out and was designed in, he certainly has a strength, an application of battle questing. People commonly defend him for. Would you agree, Matt, that he's a good application there because of his ability?
Yeah. The problem with those quests, he's good where, I've never really used him much in that application because the problem with those darn battle quests is they usually start out in battle. And, if you're going back,
he's still just attacking for 2 at the beginning of that, right?
Well, yeah. If you go back to those Heirs of Numenor quests, whenever I play, this is why I don't like those quests in solo. Now that I've played co-op, I've actually come back and rehashed my opinion of Heirs of Numenor and think it's a lot more fun in co-op. But in solo, it kind of ties you down to like 3/3 attack heroes. I feel like, and
they are difficult, yes, especially in solo. We could do a whole episode about that. Because they sort of imbalance the flow of the game, right? With their
willpower out altogether, and then you got to have all this attack power and readying, so you can not only quest through stuff, but then also So I guess in that sense, he's balanced and he can bump the attack up. But yeah, I've never really used him against a battle quest just because it's
because every enemy that comes out of the deck, his attack just goes up. So as you're revealing cards, his effective attack for questing.
So in theory, you could really swing pretty hard with that. Now I have found that those type of quests, the Heirs of Numenor quest, the enemy's engagement threat tends to be pretty low. Remember that spider that comes down and just murders you if all your guys are tapped out. So
there's nasty cards in that cycle as well.
But yeah, I see what you're saying. I've never used them for that application. I could definitely. The challenge there would be to make sure your threat's low enough to keep those enemies up in staging. And in that case, you could be battle questing for 5, 6 easy. So.
Well, we've talked a ton about this guy. one of the things that we haven't talked about, and other than just talking about Wingfoot and leather boots, is, I mean, other than the standard like readying things, what goes on Lore Faramir to make him a better hero?
Well, Wingfoot, I guess we've kind of talked about a little. That's. I mean, yeah. Anytime an enemy comes out, he readies. So, and if not for attack, for defense, in case something slips through the traps. That's the thing about Faramir. Sometimes I'm not using his attack ability. Sometimes I'm just letting the traps do their work, and then he catches something that slides through. And then when I get a good, hands upon the bow, I blast something up in staging. But I'm sorry. Can you say that again? I kind of lost track of that question. In my
no, it's just what attachments do you put on Faramir to make him awesome? So if I'm building a Faramir deck, so of course there's
Ranger, right?
So right, he's a Ranger. So
Wingfoot, and you've got leather boots. Now I know leather boots in the solo games only firing theoretically 1/3 of the time,
right.
But if you've got Wingfoot and leather boots on them for 2 cost, well, now 2 out of every 3 encounter deck cards coming off the deck are ready. So that can be a good thing.
Right.
Ranger actually opens up quite a bit. If you're playing a trap deck, Ranger Spear. I mean, when you're attacking something with a Ranger Spear, you're doing +2 damage for 1 cost.
Right.
So even anything that's up there in a Ranger Spikes, and then of course, I think what else do I usually put on? I don't generally load him up with. I
was going to say it's. I mean, I'm kind of asking the sideways question because it's, when you're playing Faramir, you're playing mainly, staging area attachments in the form of traps and things like that. So,
threat reducing
events that reduce threats and stuff. And so, I think I saw a hands upon the bow that you use
all the time. Religiously.
Right, because that's because you just want to be able to attack the staging area with the guy.
That is absolutely amazing with Faramir, because not only does it allow him to attack the staging where he's strongest, because now the enemy's up in staging, but it gives him a +1. And if I remember correctly, you can do it before.
You can do it any time.
Yeah,
right?
you can do it. I think you can do it before you quest, right? And killing it. I kind of forget. It's been a while since I played that.
Well, it's just an action.
Yeah, it's an action window. So any action window you can play it.
Do it in the planning phase.
So a great window, yeah. So a great window for that is you reveal an enemy, and then you play hands upon the bow, and then murder that enemy in staging, and then you complete questing, and now you don't have to quest against its staging threat. So yeah, I don't think you can really talk about Faramir without hands upon the bow. I would almost argue he's almost the best target for that card in the game, and that's a really good card. It has a lot of great targets. So. I know somebody will say Haldir, but
Haldir, right?
If you reach outside of for Faramir, if you reach outside of attach or the sphere, I know that your primary application sounds like it's lore and tactics, but leadership is also eligible for Steed of the North comes to mind.
Oh yeah,
which is after you engage an enemy, you get to exhaust the steed to ready, so you could get use of his willpower, and then engage an enemy, ready him for combat. And he's noble too, so you could almost put the leadership one that lets you ready. Armor. Yeah, it lets you ready characters when you put a resource in their pool if you're going to bundle him with leadership. Yeah,
Day is Rising or something like that. See, I've never played him in leadership, interestingly enough, but yeah, that ancestral armor looked nice on him too, because he's already got 2 defense, 5 hit points. Now you're talking 4 defense and
7 hit points.
7 hit points. How's that sound for defense?
Right.
So
and then if you're doing other shenanigans, you can. I mean, with this latest cycle, you can pull out attachments practically for free.
Right. So you mentioned the whole Ranger stat line as being a downside to him, but the thing that is the Ranger trait's kind of an upside, because the Ranger trait introduces ways to ready and use that defense.
Heir of Mardell. Heir of Mardell.
I was thinking to give you a resource.
Ted chimes in there. Here's the thing. So I'm going to ask the question that everybody's screaming at their screen or whatever about for this, is that, so why am I playing Lore Faramir hero over leadership Faramir ally? Because the leadership Faramir ally, I think without a doubt, is one of the strongest
pretty hard to
allies in the game, right? Like, it gives everybody +1, like, not only does he quest for 2, but if you use his ability, he's giving everybody +1 will. So, like, why am I using this Faramir so that I'm not able, and if I'm playing co-op, why am I not able to bring allow other people to bring Faramir to the table? Like, so
yeah, you're talking to a mostly solo player here, so I guess that
right.
that one.
That's always my excuse. Is
Yeah.
I play the game primarily solo. It's like,
Right.
I don't care. I'll be Gandalf guy because I'm the only person playing.
So let me ask this for you guys. You two both play. Well, I guess you say you have one guy you play with, right, Dave? But Ted, you
Yeah.
multiplayer, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty fortunate I usually get to play 2-player games, and pretty commonly actually I get some 3 or 4-player games in. Yeah.
So is being Faramir guy a thing? Like do the people still rely on that card that much to where it would be a detriment?
In my opinion, yeah, mostly because when you're playing 3 or 4 players, quests can get out of hand all of a sudden. You get more surges. You get treachery cards that trigger more often. Like
he makes a lot of money, and no, I guess he's got to choose one player, right?
He chooses one player, right? His ally version, and he's pretty powerful in a multiplayer game because you have more targets to pick from.
Mm-hmm.
You have more players. So whoever happens to have the most characters on the board at one time is eligible. And also in a multiplayer game, you usually have someone who is playing 2 or more leadership heroes. So there's someone who's like eligible to get him on the board relatively quickly if they get him in hand. So you're kind of you're removing that. But I've played plenty of multiplayer games where he's not seen any version,
right? Well,
hero or ally.
My first response to Dave's question, and of course coming from the solo perspective, was for some reason or another, I just have not had very many leadership lore decks. It seems like when I play lore wants to gravitate towards tactics sometimes. I don't know. Maybe it's just my play style. But, the thing about Ally Faramir is he is 4 cost. So you probably need more than just one leadership hero to really reliably get him in. That's a valid question. I think the biggest defense is just different spheres. I mean, if you're playing Faramir, you're playing some form of trap deck right now until I figure out Fast Red. But even then, you're looking at Spirit, right? It's like leadership is the one sphere I've never really worked into a trap deck. I've seen people do it on Rings DB, but
I mean, I guess I'm going at you a little bit just because like it's not like there's something we're missing, right? Like, I mean, Leadership Faramir is still a good card.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
And like and Lore Faramir, the hero, can be used, and
leadership.
Like, we're not missing anything, right? Like
any deck, and Lore Faramir you got to build for. Well, and the other thing with playing Lord Faramir, I got to throw this out here too, is it does help to build decks ahead of time together, because you do kind of want other low. He does well with other low threat decks, so I can see him doing well with Hobbits decks and secrecy decks, because those decks are also sharing his mission of keeping enemies up and staging, even if you don't got the traps to stick them up there in the cards. So.
Yeah, you could actually have someone with we talked about Fast Dread, right?
Yeah.
You could have in a multiplayer game, someone else could be running Fast Dread, right? So during the defense, someone else does that instead of in solo. They bounce the enemy back, and then during the attack phase, you get to utilize the bonus. So
I think a very interesting fellowship would be a Faramir trap deck combined with a Fast Red. And who's that guy who spears enemies in space? Dune here, yeah, that's right.
So this is really funny. That it's like we're channeling Grant here. So like Grant has this Done Here Duck Shoot deck where he just takes Done Here, he uses Fast Red to push his Done Here to push the enemy back, and then just loads Done Here up and like boom. Like
so maybe Grant and I should team up with Faramir and Done Here and see how that goes in a 2-player game.
Well, that was actually one of the things that I was thinking of when I don't know, a while ago. Like you were talking about him, and I was like, well, you have all these enemies in the staging area, and while that buffs, while that buffs Faramir, at some point you can't just keep up with that pace. You can't have 20 enemies in the staging area, all in traps.
Yep.
Like, so you have to be able to get rid of them somehow. And so you have Hands Upon the Bow, but Done Here
and Athelian Pit. I also have that.
Right, which eventually will kill him, and then you can take Dameron and recycle it and stuff like that. But or Amborn, I guess. But I mean, but that's the thing, at least that gives you an option, right?
Sure.
You know what? I was actually really curious. I pulled up Rings DB just to see how many other Faramir decks are out there using this particular version of them. And a deck caught my eye that was called Ye New Ranger Trap Deck, and it's by this guy called M Duckworth 83. So I pulled up your most popular deck list here, the one that you seem to reference the most. So just to give a quick recap for everyone, cards that Matt commonly uses in his deck: Black Arrow, he's eligible for, which I had forgotten about. He's got the range trait. We mentioned Followed and Forest Snare, some great traps. But another great mention that you use in your deck is he's Proud Hunters.
Yes.
He enables.
Yeah.
He's a noble and a ranger, so he's half of that no matter which way you swing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's thematic too, right? Because don't they get married in the end of Lord of the Rings? Eowyn and Faramir?
They may be a thing. I don't know if they.
I think they are. That's how I just.
That's a Grant question. This is where we miss Grant because he's usually the lore.
He's the expert on lore.
Well, do we have anything else to say about Faramir Hero? Or
if there's
I have to.
There's unless there's any final words, I suppose we can ring this guy, right?
Should we ring him?
Let's ring him.
Okay, so actually, Ted, we had some listener feedback. And I've always struggled with, my little introduction about the ring. Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna try it out. I'm gonna take the I'm gonna listen to the listener, and I'm gonna see how this works. So okay. So
we're open to listener feedback. So thank you very much for sharing your comments.
All right. So Phil, this is your shout out. So Matt, you may or may not know, but we have an arbitrary yet highly scientific method for which we rate our cards. We have one ring, which is the one card to rule them all. Mm-hmm. And 10 rings means we are going to cast that card back into the fiery chasm from whence it came.
This is going to be painful for me, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, maybe not. I hope not. So, Matt, 1 to 10, 1 being good, 10 being horrible. We'll give you the choice. You're the guest. Do you want to go first, second, or third for your ring rating?
So I'm supposed to give something besides a 1 here? Lore Faramir?
Well, okay.
I'll give you an honest approximation.
Well, but you can choose where you want to ring. Do you want me to, do you want to wait until Ted and I go, or do you want to go first? Do you want to go second? Do you want to go third? Who do you want to?
Well, I'll just lead the way to bring the average up. Not that it matters.
Okay. Okay, so I guess Ted, you're going to go first. No, I'm just kidding. So Matt, you're going to go first.
Okay. Yeah, 1 would definitely be being a fanboy. I won't do that. But
well, you can.
Yeah.
We don't bring people on the show because they hate the card they're going to talk about. That's
right.
For sure.
Absolutely.
I'm thinking between 1 and 10. I think it's fair to give him. If I'm rating him based on the way I typically rate cards and what his ceiling is and the niche deck made for him,
absolutely,
I'm gonna give him a 3.
Okay,
I think it's fair.
Why do you say?
I think 3? That's Faramir.
Faramir.
Nice pun, sir. I
okay. A part of me just simultaneously.
I gotta at least be honest enough. I can't say that he's absolutely top tier. He's fun to build around, but Dave kind of had a pretty good point back there. Is like, is he the shining star of the deck? I don't even know that he's the shining star. It's like they all kind of work together as a well-cogged machine. I don't think he shines as well without Damrod. I mean, Eowyn, they all kind of work together now. It's not like a Hero Bjorn, who pretty much can just dominate the combat phase of a deck. Nothing like that.
There's very few cards. That's a good analysis, heroes, Matt. That actually do that because I always say you can't rate cards solid, with their sole purpose without any context to another card.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like what is pick any leadership Boromir with no Gondor allies.
But you do have that Tactics Bjorn, though. That guy is pretty good. He can minimize the combat phase for a couple turns with no attachments, no other cards. So he's pretty. He might be the most in that direction. But
yeah. So rating cards in comparison, with what they combo well with and who pairs with them. Yeah, that's a good rating.
It's tough to rate him in a vacuum, right? That's kind of what you're saying.
Yep.
So, Ted, what's your rating?
Well, I never. It's hard for me to rate cards badly because there's a purpose. There's a purpose to everything. I think Lore Faramir. We touched briefly on. He'll soon have more versions coming out, and we only really touched upon on one other one. He's probably for me closer to a 7. A 7, which might be the lowest rating I've actually given a card. When you compare him to other heroes, you're like, well, I want a ranged attacking hero. He's got competition.
Which, if the card pool grows, this gets trickier, right? Because the competition just keeps on building and building.
Mm-hmm. You're like, oh, okay, well, there's other even in Sphere, we mentioned Haldir is direct competition in Sphere, and then out of Sphere, you have a lot more other range. So he's very viable, and he's a lot of application and a lot of quests. But it's tough to because he's so focused. I think another gripe about him is if you're constantly keeping enemies in the staging area, you have to quest against them later.
Yeah.
Ranger's Bike certainly is like by far the best card, right? Because it does double duty where it negates the threat of the enemy and boosts the attack, right? Like, does so much. It's a fantastic card to combo with them. But when I deck build, I tend to get caught in that trap where I'm like, well, now I'm not mounting the willpower to get his attack boost. So it'll probably just take a playthrough of someone who's more experienced. So if I pull up this ye new Ranger Trap deck, that will probably very likely swing him into a higher rating for me.
Well, if you do pull it up, feel free to update it and let me know too, because that's getting some age on it now. I think it was well, you probably see what's the last pack it's using there. Crossing
of Poros.
Yeah, so it's back on the run. So
yeah, there may be some.
There might be some new material that may slip in there, but
yeah.
Well,
David.
Yeah, right. That's the first time you've had to throw the ring rating over to me, right, Ted? So, I have to, Matt. I love you, man. But
I can see where this one's going already.
Yeah. So I mean, when I ring a card, it's not that it's my ring rating is a lot based on how much I'm drawn to be using a character. Like, that's really what it or card, right? And so when I'm looking at Lore Faramir, I totally get the trap deck mechanism and why he's awesome there. But that, to me, I don't even know if you have to run Lore Faramir in a trap deck to make it effective. I mean,
oh, certainly.
No, there's getting to be as many trap deck. I mean, there's a lot of ways to run a trap deck. I'll go ahead and say that on the record.
Right, and so I'm not really drawn to use that hero, and then coupled with the fact that there's leadership Faramir, which still gets put into the to be considered pile anytime I'm building anything with leadership in. I have a hard time with this hero because it's like deep down inside I really like him, but deep down inside I also don't really like him. Do you know, like I like the 2/2/2, but I don't like the 2/2/2.
So is this kind of like one of those memes where you see the guy walking with his girlfriend, and the girlfriend is Lore Faramir, and then the lady in the red dress is Haldir walking across?
No, the lady in the red dress is Lore Faramir.
Yeah.
They're both Lore Faramir. That's the problem. You know, like I I feel like I want it, like in terms of my ring rating, I'm gonna have to stick with a 7. I mean, I just
savage.
Yeah, I mean,
brutal.
I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate his abilities and all those things, but he's always that guy. Like, I have to fall on the side of the community with, like, I get it, but I don't get it. Like I see what I see what you're doing there, but like it's just so, I don't know, like it's just hard to maneuver. So I think I have to stick with a 7.
Yeah, and I'll admit I haven't put him on the table for many cycles.
Right. Well, but that's but isn't that the point though, right? Like, Ted, you and I and Grant just got into it about Hero Gandalf. You're still using decks with Hero Gandalf, even though, like, Matt,
that's one I've almost never used. I've always struggled to even.
So Matt, what's your ring rating on Hero Gandalf?
Oh gosh,
I'm just kidding. Like certain, depending on the person, certain people play certain heroes, and like you're drawn to them or not drawn to them. Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining us.
Guys.
This has been an amazing time.
Yeah.
I can't say enough how much I've been dying to get you on the show, and it's always awesome to hear that drawl you have a little bit to, like.
Well, thank you, kind sir.
Just, yeah. And you don't have to. I used to live in Texas for a few years, so I can drop into a little bit of Texas.
Well, I'm from Illinois, but I'm from downstate Illinois. So it's important to say that much.
Right, the unpaved part.
Yeah, the unpaved part. That's right.
Right. So, Matt, anyways, thanks a lot for joining us. We've had a great time with you.
All right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Okay, everybody, join us again for another episode of Card Talk. Have a great day.
And if you're interested in finding this or any of our back episodes of Card Talk, feel free to search YouTube, where you can find our flagship video episodes with the username Card Talk 2018. Or you can search the RSS feed, cardtalk2018.libsyn.org, for our extended audio versions of our podcast. Or you can find us on Facebook at Card Talk 2018. And if you have any questions for Grant or myself, or for both of us, feel free to email us at cardtalk2018@gmail.com.